This story is titled, My Now Ex-Wife Got Fired, but told me she'd just be a housewife for me. But she couldn't even fry an egg. The house was always dirty, and she had headaches every night. So I left her, and she was shocked to find an empty house with only divorce papers on the table. Next day, she blew up my phone with 25 missed calls. Hey Reddit, I'm 42 years old, and I just survived what I can only describe as an insane marriage that perfectly demonstrates how social media is absolutely destroying relationships. This is a story about what happens when a woman completely loses respect for her husband and starts believing she deserves to be treated like royalty simply for existing. For 16 years, I was married to my 40-year-old wife, Victoria. Until about 4 years ago, we were actually winning at life. We had just paid off our mortgage on a solid 4-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood, something that represented years of sacrifice and smart financial decisions. I was busting my ass as a self-employed contractor, working 65-hour weeks regardless of weather conditions, rain or shine. I had built my business from absolutely nothing into something that was pulling in solid money annually. My journey started with just me and a beat-up Chevy pickup truck, taking whatever jobs I could possibly get my hands on. Bathroom renovations, deck builds, fixing botched DIY disasters that other contractors had walked away from. Anything and everything to build a reputation in the trade. I had to learn everything the hard way, since trade school was a luxury I simply couldn't afford at the time. I spent my first 3 years in business fixing my own mistakes completely for free, just to keep customers happy and maintain the reputation I was desperately trying to build. By year 6, I had grown the operation to include my own crew of 4 solid guys who really knew their stuff and showed up on time every single day. Kevin, my lead carpenter, could frame a house extension in his sleep. The man was an absolute artist with wood and tools. Derek handled all our electrical work and never cut corners, even when it would have been easier and cheaper to do so. Brett was our plumber who could fix anything that involved water without flooding half the neighborhood in the process. Tommy was my drywall guy who could make walls look like glass. Smooth, perfect, and professional every time. We operated like a well-oiled machine, taking on full home renovations and actually making decent money for the first time in years. Victoria worked in hospital administration and was making decent money herself. For the first time in our entire lives together, we weren't living paycheck to paycheck. I'm talking about the kind of financial freedom where you can actually breathe, where unexpected expenses don't send you into a panic spiral. We had earned this stability through years of grinding, saving every penny we could, eating cheap meals so we could make extra mortgage payments and get ahead of the interest. The business was finally hitting its stride. I had a 7-month waiting list for custom kitchen installations, which in the construction trade means you've officially made it. People were willing to wait over half a year for my crew's work, and that's not something that happens overnight. Victoria seemed genuinely happy during this period. She would brag to her friends about how we were debt-free except for the house, and how I was building something real and meaningful with my hands, while other guys were stuck in corporate cubicles. She used to respect the grind, you know? She would pack me proper lunches every morning, tell people proudly that her husband was his own boss and had built his success from scratch. She even helped with invoicing and paperwork when I was completely swamped with jobs. But here's where the first crack started showing in what I thought was our solid foundation. We'd go out with other couples for dinner or social events, and I started noticing how Victoria would eye their lifestyles with a look I'd never seen before. My mate Connor and his wife lived in a bigger house, but what Victoria didn't see was that they were absolutely drowning in debt. Every month was a struggle for them to make their payments, but from the outside, their place looked impressive. My business partner, Jake's girlfriend, drove a fancy car that turned heads wherever she went. But she was financing it at 22% interest, like a complete fool. Jake actually showed me the paperwork one day. $750 monthly payments for 8 years on a car that would be worth half that amount in just 4 years. It was total financial insanity, but it looked absolutely perfect in her Instagram photos, and that's apparently all that mattered to her. I genuinely thought Victoria was smarter than that kind of thinking. She used to mock people who bought stuff they couldn't afford, calling them all flash and no cash. We would laugh together about people who prioritized appearance over actual financial security. But something fundamental shifted when we achieved real, legitimate financial stability. Instead of being satisfied with winning the game we'd been playing for years, she started looking around for the next level, like she was keeping score in some completely different game that I didn't even know we were supposed to be playing. The conversations started innocently enough, or at least that's how they seemed at the time. "That's a beautiful kitchen," she'd say after visiting friends, and then follow up with, "I wonder what something like that costs." Or she'd comment about how spacious their master bedroom was, how nice it must be to have all that extra space. I should have seen the writing on the wall when she started following luxury home accounts on Instagram. I should have paid closer attention when she began saving photos of kitchens that cost more than most people's cars. But I was busy working, focused on building our future together, assuming she was just daydreaming like normal people do when they flip through magazines or browse online. I had no idea she was already planning our financial destruction, one Pinterest board at a time. Tyler, my best friend since high school, was actually the first person to notice something was off about Victoria's behavior. We were having drinks after a particularly brutal foundation job that had left us both exhausted, and he brought up something that should have been a massive red flag. "Mate, Victoria's been asking my wife a lot of questions about our house lately," he said, looking concerned. "Weird questions like how much we pay monthly and what we qualified for when we bought it." I brushed it off completely, which was a big mistake. In my head, she was just curious about the housing market, maybe thinking ahead for our future, or trying to understand how other people manage their finances. I had absolutely no idea she was already planning our financial destruction, gathering intelligence for her upcoming campaign to upgrade our lifestyle beyond our means. The property browsing started casually enough to seem completely harmless. Sunday mornings, she'd be sitting on her laptop with her coffee, scrolling through Zillow just for fun. I'd glance over occasionally and see normal houses in our general price range, maybe slightly bigger than ours, which seemed like no big deal. Everyone looks at real estate online sometimes, right? But then the houses she was bookmarking got progressively bigger and more expensive. Within just a few weeks, she was saving properties that cost 3 times our house's value, places that were completely out of our league financially. When I asked about it, she'd laugh it off with a casual, "Just dreaming, babe, no harm in looking." I believed her because I wanted to believe her, but the harm was already starting. The real harm started when she began scheduling actual viewings of these properties. I came home from work one day to find her getting ready in her best dress, looking like she was preparing for some kind of special occasion. "Where are you going all dolled up?" I asked, genuinely curious since we didn't have any plans that I knew of. "Just popping out to see a house with Diana," she replied casually, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. You know how she loves looking at property. Diana, her unemployed, twice-divorced sister who lived off alimony and child support like it was some kind of pension plan she'd earned through her failed marriages. This should have been red flag number 1, but I was exhausted from a long day pouring concrete in the heat, and honestly didn't think much of it at the time. I figured it was just harmless window shopping between sisters. When Victoria came back that evening, her whole energy was completely different. She was excited in a way I hadn't seen in years, but it wasn't excitement about me or us or anything we'd built together over the past 16 years. She was excited about granite countertops and walk-in closets and 3-car garages, material things that had nothing to do with our actual life or relationship. "You should see this place," she said, immediately pulling out her phone to show me photos. 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, amazing kitchen with this huge island in the center. The master suite even has its own sitting area, like a little living room just for us. I looked at the listing she was showing me, and my stomach immediately dropped. $850,000. The monthly payments on a house like that would have been more than I made during some of our slower months, especially during winter when construction work naturally slowed down. Even during our best months, after taxes, business expenses, and paying my crew their wages, those mortgage payments would have eaten up nearly 75% of my actual take-home income. "That's beautiful, babe, but it's way out of our league financially," I said, trying to be gentle but realistic about our situation. Wrong thing to say. Her face changed instantly, like I had just told her that Santa Claus wasn't real and had personally ruined Christmas for her. "Why do you always have to be so negative about everything?" she snapped. "I'm not saying we should buy it right now. I'm just sharing something nice with my husband. Can't I do that without you immediately shooting it down?" This became the pattern that would define the next phase of our marriage. She would go view houses we absolutely couldn't afford, come home buzzing with excitement about features and amenities that were completely beyond our means. And then I would be cast as the villain for bringing up the reality of our financial situation. Meanwhile, I'm out there breaking my back every single day to maintain the lifestyle we actually had. And she's developing champagne tastes on what was essentially a beer budget, no matter how successful my business had become. The breaking point in this house hunting phase came when she actually brought me along to a viewing. I have to admit it was a beautiful house. I'll give her that much. The 4-car garage was bigger than some people's entire apartments. The kitchen island was literally the size of my work truck. The master bathroom had a tub that could comfortably fit my entire crew with room to spare. But while the real estate agent droned on about investment potential and neighborhood appreciation, I was running the numbers in my head like I always did. After business expenses, crew wages, equipment costs, insurance, and taxes, I would need to literally double my current revenue just to qualify for the mortgage on this place. That would mean working 7 days a week without any breaks, taking on jobs I would normally refuse because they were too risky or too far outside my expertise, and probably letting go of Kevin and Derek to cut labor costs, effectively destroying the team I'd spent years building. I explained all of this to Victoria on the drive home, laying out exactly what it would take financially for us to afford a house like that. Her response should have ended our marriage right there and then. If you were really ambitious, you'd see this as motivation to grow your business. Motivation. She called my 65-hour work weeks a lack of motivation. I was already working more hours than most people could physically handle. I had built my company from absolutely nothing, had 4 skilled guys working for me, and was pulling in 6 figures in a trade where most contractors struggle to clear $50,000 a year. But apparently that wasn't enough ambition for the woman I'd married. She started making passive-aggressive comments about other couples who took risks and invested in their future. Every single conversation we had became focused on what we didn't have instead of celebrating what we'd actually achieved through years of hard work and sacrifice. The house that represented years of smart financial decisions and represented our success suddenly became too small and not suitable for where we are in life now. Against every instinct I had, I caved. God help me, I actually caved to the pressure. I told myself it was an investment, that property values always go up over time, that maybe she was right about growing into it financially. We put our perfectly good house on the market and got pre-approved for the $850,000 place that had started this whole nightmare. But I wasn't completely stupid about the situation. Before signing anything, I restructured my business as an LLC with myself as the sole member, which gave me better legal protection. I separated my business accounts more clearly from our personal finances and started keeping much better records of everything: income, expenses, client payments, the works. If this house situation went sideways, which my gut was telling me it would, I wanted my business protected from any potential fallout. The day we actually moved into the new house, I felt physically sick. Not excited about our upgrade, not proud of what we'd accomplished. Sick. Like I had just signed my own prison sentence and handed over the key to someone who didn't have my best interests at heart. Tyler helped with the move and pulled me aside during one of our trips with boxes. "Brother, I really hope you know what you're doing here," he said quietly, looking around at the expensive house that was now somehow ours. "This whole thing feels like a mistake to me." He was absolutely right, but I was already in too deep to back out. The mortgage payments were absolutely crushing our monthly budget. Meanwhile, Victoria was posting photos of our new kitchen on Facebook, like she was some kind of interior design influencer, playing Lady of the Manor while I was eating ramen noodles for lunch to save money. Living in that new house was like wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too small. Technically possible, but constantly uncomfortable and restrictive. Every month, writing that mortgage check felt like bleeding money that I had worked my ass off to earn. I had to turn down social events with friends because we couldn't afford them anymore. I couldn't buy new tools when my old ones broke down, which meant my work efficiency suffered. I started eating lunch from the gas station instead of bringing proper meals because every single penny counted now. The financial stress started affecting the quality of my work, which had never happened before in my entire career. When you're constantly worried about money, you make mistakes that you wouldn't normally make. I had to completely redo a tile job because I rushed through it trying to squeeze in an extra project to make more money. That mistake cost me $950 in materials and an entire weekend of unpaid labor to fix it properly. Kevin noticed that I was constantly on edge and asked if everything was okay at home. How do you explain to your lead carpenter that your wife's house obsession is slowly destroying everything you've built? How do you admit that you made a decision you knew was wrong just to avoid conflict at home? Victoria, meanwhile, was absolutely loving life in our new house. She posted constant photos of our beautiful home on social media, had her friends over for wine nights in the fancy living room, and acted like she was the mastermind behind our success. She had gotten a taste of the lifestyle she thought she deserved, and instead of being satisfied, she wanted more. 3 months after moving in, she started talking about her car. Her perfectly fine 4-year-old Honda Accord that had low mileage and, most importantly, no monthly payments. "It looks so out of place in our driveway," she said one morning, staring out the window like the Honda had personally offended her and her family's honor. "All the neighbors have nice cars. It's embarrassing to drive something like that when we live in a house like this." Embarrassing. This from the woman who used to say that cars were just transportation, that spending money on status symbols was foolish when you could invest that money instead. But now that we lived in an expensive neighborhood, apparently our reliable, paid-off car was somehow a reflection on our worth as people. But wait, let me introduce you to the real villains of this story, her sister Diana and her friends Chloe and Maya. I came to call them the entitlement trinity because they were 3 grown women who had turned being completely useless into an art form that they were proud of. Every Thursday, without fail, I would come home from a hard day of work to find the entitlement trinity holding court in my kitchen. They would be sipping wine that I had paid for and talking like they ran some kind of hedge fund, discussing strategies for extracting maximum resources from their respective men. Diana was 3 divorces deep and had no job, but somehow treated alimony like it was a paycheck she had earned through legitimate work, calling her lifestyle freedom. This woman had never worked a real job for more than 8 months in her entire adult life. Her longest employment was at a department store, which she quit because she felt retail work was beneath her. But somehow, she had become the group's relationship expert and financial advisor. Chloe was married to money and spent her entire life buying expensive crap to post online. Like that was some kind of meaningful accomplishment. Her husband worked in investment banking, and she treated his income like her personal entertainment budget. She would show up at our house with new designer bags every week while lecturing my wife about knowing your worth and demanding what you deserve. Maya was planning her wedding like she was running a military operation, acting like saying yes to a guy with a law degree made her royalty. This girl had actual spreadsheets for her wedding, color-coordinated spreadsheets. She spent more time coordinating centerpiece colors than some people spend on their entire careers. But somehow, she was qualified to give relationship advice. These were the women who were telling Victoria how real men should behave in relationships. These 3 would have their weekly meetings at our house, girls' nights, where they would discuss in detail how their men should be treating them better. I would come home from a 14-hour day laying foundations in the heat, covered in concrete dust, to find them sitting in my kitchen bitching about how modern men don't know how to provide properly. It was like a support group for professional gold diggers. They would sit around my kitchen table, eating food that I had bought and drinking wine that I had paid for, while planning elaborate strategies for how to extract more resources from their respective men. The psychological warfare they engaged in was subtle, but constant and incredibly effective. They would praise other husbands who bought their wives expensive gifts just because. They would talk endlessly about romantic gestures that cost thousands of dollars. They would share stories about couples who invested in experiences like month-long European vacations or weekend trips to Napa Valley. And my wife would soak it all up like a sponge, absorbing every word and comparing it to what I was providing. Chloe would brag about her husband's latest appreciation gift, a $2,500 handbag, because she had supposedly had a stressful week. Diana would chime in about how her most recent ex-husband had finally learned to show gratitude by paying for her spa weekends at luxury resorts. Maya would share Pinterest boards of engagement rings that cost more than my work truck, discussing them like they were reasonable expectations. Tyler started warning me again about what he was observing. "These women are poison, mate," he said one evening after witnessing one of their strategy sessions. "They're filling her head with ideas you can't afford and shouldn't have to prove. This isn't going to end well." The car situation came to a head when the Honda's air conditioning needed a repair. Nothing major, maybe a $400 fix that would have the car running perfectly again. But Victoria used this minor maintenance issue as proof that we needed to buy a completely new car. She started showing me lease deals, talking about reliability and our neighborhood image like these were legitimate concerns. "All the neighbors drive BMWs or Audis," she said, pointing out our window like she was presenting evidence in a court case. "What does it say about us that I'm driving the oldest car on the street? People judge you by what you drive, and I don't want them thinking we can't afford to live here." I made the second biggest mistake of my marriage. The first was buying the house, and now I caved again on the car situation. But this time, I was starting to learn how to protect myself financially. I put the BMW lease in my name only, telling her it was for better credit terms. But actually, I was beginning to understand that I needed to control our major financial obligations. She got her trophy car, and the monthly payments were absolutely insane, but she promised to pick up overtime shifts at work to cover the difference. She promised that this was the last thing she would ask for, that she just wanted to feel proud of what we had built together. She never picked up a single overtime shift. In fact, she started working less than before. She called in sick more often, took longer lunch breaks, and generally acted like her job was optional now that she had her status symbol BMW to drive around town. The BMW became her entire identity. She would take photos of it from different angles and post them online constantly. She made little comments about upgrading her lifestyle and how good it felt to finally have nice things. Meanwhile, I was eating gas station sandwiches for lunch and skipping drinks with the guys because we were financially stretched beyond belief, struggling to make ends meet despite my successful business. That night, I decided it was time for a serious conversation about our finances. I sat her down and showed her the actual numbers, laid out our monthly expenses versus our income, and explained exactly how tight things had become. I suggested that maybe we should think about scaling back some of our expenses, perhaps downgrading the house or returning the car to get our finances back on track. Her response hit me like a freight truck and completely changed how I saw the woman I had married. If you can't afford to take care of your wife properly, maybe you need to work harder. Work harder. I was already working 65-hour weeks, coming home with calluses on my hands from swinging hammers and operating heavy equipment. I came home exhausted every single day, covered in dust and concrete, having given everything I had to provide for our family. But apparently that wasn't enough effort for the woman who was supposed to be my partner in life. This was the moment when I started losing respect for the woman I had married. The Victoria I fell in love with 16 years earlier would never have said something so dismissive and cruel about my work. That woman understood the value of money because she had worked for every penny. That woman appreciated sacrifice because she had made sacrifices herself. This new Victoria was someone else entirely, and she was just getting started with her transformation. The real change began when Victoria discovered lifestyle Instagram and TikTok accounts. At first, it seemed completely harmless. Just cooking videos, home decor tips, and fashion inspiration like millions of women look at every day. Normal stuff that wives browse through when they want ideas or entertainment. But the algorithm had other plans for my wife. Within just a few weeks, her entire feed was full of what I can only describe as traditional wife influencers. These were typically young, attractive women in perfect makeup and vintage dresses, showing off their pristine homes while their apparently wealthy husbands funded their elaborate cottagecore fantasies in the background. She started watching videos with titles like "My Husband Works, So I Don't Have to," and "Embracing Feminine Energy Through Submission." These influencers were basically running a masterclass in weaponized femininity. 20-something women with professional ring lights and $400 vintage dresses teaching other women how to manipulate men into funding their Instagram aesthetic. They would post carefully curated videos about feminine energy, while their camera equipment cost more than most people's monthly salary. They talked about traditional values while living completely modern lives funded by men who worked corporate jobs to pay for their wives' social media careers. Victoria started watching these videos religiously, spending hours every day consuming this content. I would come home from work covered in dust and concrete, exhausted from a long day of physical labor, and she would be on the couch absorbing hours of this manipulation disguised as lifestyle advice. When I would ask about her day, instead of having a normal conversation, she would show me videos and expect me to be inspired by them. "Look at this," she would say, showing me some 24-year-old making sourdough bread in a kitchen that cost more than my truck. This is what life could be like if we prioritized differently. Prioritized differently. That was code for, if you made more money so I could quit working and focus on looking pretty for social media. The Trinity absolutely loved this new development in Victoria's thinking. Diana would come over specifically to watch these videos with her, and they would make comments like, "This is how relationships should work," and men used to actually take care of their families properly. 3 women who wouldn't know hard work if it came up and introduced itself were sitting in my kitchen, critiquing how relationships should function based on social media content created by women half their age. They started having what I can only describe as research sessions, where they would analyze these influencers like they were studying for advanced degrees in professional parasitism. They would take notes, share screenshots, and create group chats to discuss strategies for implementing what they learned. Chloe would chime in with stories about her investment banker husband buying her whatever she wanted because he appreciates what I bring to the relationship. When I asked what exactly she brought besides looking good at dinner parties and spending his money, Victoria accused me of being deliberately obtuse about women's contributions to marriage. Maya started bringing printed articles about high-value women and feminine energy to their wine nights. Suddenly, every conversation in my house became about what women deserve and how modern men had forgotten how to provide and protect. The woman was getting marriage advice from someone whose biggest accomplishment was not getting dumped before her wedding day. This is when I finally got smart about protecting myself. While Victoria was busy planning her fantasy future as a kept woman, I quietly started securing my own financial future with careful, strategic moves. I started moving some of my business income into a separate account, which was perfectly legal since it was my sole proprietorship. I began documenting her work attendance issues and her increasingly open statements about wanting to quit her job. I started keeping detailed records of all her spending demands and the continuous lifestyle inflation that seemed to have no end in sight. Most importantly, I started documenting our conversations. Since we lived in a one-party consent state, this was completely legal. I also began taking screenshots of her social media activity, her Pinterest boards full of expensive lifestyle content, her comment history on traditional wife videos, and her posts about deserving to be provided for. Tyler noticed the change in my approach and my newfound strategic thinking. "You're playing chess while she's playing checkers," he said one evening after witnessing one of her entitled rants about how hard her life was. He was right. I had finally started thinking several moves ahead instead of just reacting to her latest demands. The worst part of this entire situation was watching her attitude toward work change completely. She had been genuinely ambitious when we first met, working her way up to management and taking real pride in her career accomplishments. Now she started talking about her job like it was some kind of punishment she didn't deserve to endure. "I'm tired of being masculine all day," she would say. Like managing a budget and dealing with workplace responsibilities was somehow the same as working construction in 100-degree heat. Dealing with deadlines and office politics. Women aren't meant to live like this. It's unnatural and stressful. When I pointed out that her paycheck was covering the BMW payments that she had promised to handle with overtime work, she would get immediately defensive and hostile. "Money isn't everything," she would snap. "What about my happiness? What about feeling fulfilled as a woman? I shouldn't have to sacrifice my feminine energy just to pay for material things." I started taking screenshots of her social media posts about hating work and wanting to be provided for. I called these screenshots my digital breadcrumbs. You never know when you'll need to retrace someone's steps and prove what they actually said and believed. The breaking point came when she started actively sabotaging her work performance instead of quitting like a responsible adult. She wasn't just planning to leave her job, she was sabotaging it. She started showing up late, taking longer lunch breaks than she was allowed, and being deliberately difficult in meetings with her supervisors. She was basically speed-running her way to unemployment, and when I asked her why she didn't just quit professionally, she explained the strategy. The Trinity, led by Diana, who had never worked a real job in her life, had convinced her that she deserved severance pay for her years of service. Diana was coaching her on how to get fired without it being classified as for cause, which would allow her to collect unemployment benefits. A professional parasite was giving career advice to my wife. "You literally cannot make this stuff up." When I expressed serious concern about this plan and its potential consequences, she hit me with the line that ended whatever respect I had left for her as a person. A real man would be excited about the opportunity to take care of his wife completely. That statement stuck with me for days. I didn't even try to argue with her anymore. I just sat there wondering when exactly the woman I had built a life with stopped seeing me as her partner and started viewing me like an employee with benefits. Someone whose job was to fund her lifestyle while she pursued her personal fulfillment. I kept thinking that maybe I had missed the signs early in our relationship, or maybe she had always been like this, and I was just too busy working and building our future to notice the warning signs. Tyler was there when she made that comment about real men being excited to provide completely. He looked at me like I had just been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Later, when she was upstairs getting ready for bed, he grabbed my shoulder and said something I'll never forget. "Brother, she's gone. Whatever woman you married, this isn't her anymore. She's turned into one of those social media wives who thinks she deserves a salary just for existing. The woman you fell in love with doesn't live here anymore." That night, lying in bed next to someone who had become a complete stranger, I realized Tyler was absolutely right about the situation, but I also knew that I needed to continue documenting everything that was happening, because I had a feeling this was all heading toward a confrontation that would determine the rest of my life. Victoria's traditional wife research phase was like watching someone join a cult, except most cults usually require some kind of actual commitment or sacrifice from their members. She found Facebook groups with names like Embracing Feminine Submission and Traditional Wives United, where women shared tips on how to get their husbands to fund their lifestyle dreams. The irony was absolutely staggering. She wanted to be a traditional wife but still expected all the conveniences and luxuries of modern life without any of the actual responsibilities. She would spend hours planning her transformation into the perfect housewife while ordering DoorDash for dinner because cooking was too stressful after work. She bought vintage dresses online that she never wore, signed up for cooking classes that she never attended, and created Pinterest boards that looked like 1950s fever dreams. But when it came to learning actual traditional wife skills, she showed zero interest in putting in any effort. "I'll grow into it," she would say, when I asked about the cooking classes she had skipped or the homemaking books she had ordered but never opened. It's about embracing the mindset first, then the skills will naturally follow. The mindset, apparently, included hiring a housekeeper because our house was too big to manage alone. Keep in mind, this was the same woman who used to clean our smaller house just fine while working full-time. But now she needed professional help for a house that she had specifically wanted and insisted we buy. Meanwhile, I was quietly building my case for what I increasingly suspected would be an inevitable divorce. I documented everything she said and did. I also started making smart business moves to protect my assets. I restructured some contracts to delay payment until after potential divorce proceedings. I started building larger jobs with payment installments that would spread my income across different tax years. I built up a cash reserve in business accounts that weren't joint marital property. The Trinity supported every aspect of Victoria's delusion with the enthusiasm of people selling pyramid scheme products. Tyler came over one Saturday while I was outside working on our fence, couldn't afford to hire a contractor anymore, and he witnessed one of their strategic planning meetings through our open windows. He heard Diana telling Victoria, "You need to establish your value before you make the transition. Men don't respect what they get for free." Chloe added her wisdom. "My husband didn't appreciate me until I started acting like the prize I am." The prize? This woman was like a participation trophy. Everyone gets one, but nobody really wants one or values it. When Tyler told me about this conversation later, I felt physically sick to my stomach. These women were sitting in my living room, drinking my wine, and strategizing about how to manipulate me into funding Victoria's unemployment. That evening, I tried having one more serious conversation with Victoria about our finances and her actual plans for the future. I showed her our budget again, explained exactly how her quitting would affect our ability to maintain our current lifestyle, and asked what her concrete plan was for contributing to our household. Her response was a masterclass in circular logic that would have made a philosophy professor weep. "Traditional wives provide value that can't be measured in money," she said with complete seriousness. "I'd be managing our household, supporting your career, and creating a peaceful home environment that would allow you to be more successful." I asked for specifics. "Okay, so you'd handle all the cooking, cleaning, shopping, and household management?" "Well, I'd oversee it," she replied. "We'd still need the cleaning service because the house is so big, and managing contractors and service people is a full-time job in itself." "What about cooking?" I pressed. "I'll learn eventually. There are so many resources online, and it's really about intention and love, not just technical skill." "So what exactly would change on a day-to-day basis if you quit your job tomorrow?" "My energy would be completely different," she said, as if this explained everything. "I'd be more feminine, more supportive, more present for you when you come home from work." More feminine. This from a woman who hadn't initiated sex in months and treated every conversation like a hostile business negotiation. Tyler finally lost his patience during one dinner, where Victoria spent the entire meal explaining her feminine awakening to him and his wife, like she was delivering a TED Talk on revolutionary lifestyle concepts. "So, let me get this straight," Tyler said, setting down his fork and looking directly at her. "You want to quit your job, keep all your current expenses, hire people to do the housework, and somehow this makes you more valuable to your marriage?" Victoria's face went red with indignation. "You don't understand because you've never had to manage a high-value woman." I looked at her like she had just declared herself royalty. "You mean someone who doesn't cook, doesn't clean, doesn't work, and still expects luxury? That's not high value, that's high maintenance with delusions. high-value woman. She had started using this phrase constantly, usually to justify why she deserved things without earning them or contributing equivalent value in return. Victoria stormed out of the dinner that night, clearly furious that Tyler had called out her logic in front of witnesses. Later, when we got home, she accused me of letting my friend disrespect her and demanded that I choose between my marriage and my friendship with Tyler. That ultimatum was the moment I knew for certain that she had to go. Any woman who would demand that I cut ties with my best friend since high school, a man who had been nothing but supportive and honest, was someone who no longer deserved my loyalty or commitment. The final confrontation came after Victoria had been actively working on getting fired for 3 months. Her behavior at work had become so obviously deliberate sabotage that her boss finally called her in for a formal meeting about her performance and attendance issues. Instead of being concerned about her career or our financial stability, she was actually excited about the potential severance package. She acted like she had just discovered buried treasure, completely thrilled about the prospect of getting paid to leave a job she had been systematically destroying. That evening, she came home with Diana in tow and announced that she was ready to fully embrace her feminine journey and transition away from corporate life. There was no discussion about our finances, no consideration for my opinion or our partnership, no planning for how we would manage on a single income. Just a unilateral declaration that she was done working, effective immediately. The level of entitlement was absolutely off the charts. She had spent months consuming social media content about being provided for while actively destroying her own ability to provide for herself. The disconnect from reality was so complete that I wondered if she was having some kind of psychological break. I was completely done playing games and pretending this was normal behavior. "Fine," I said, looking directly at her. "But if you want the full traditional wife experience, you get the whole package, not just the parts that benefit you." I laid out exactly what every single video she had shown me actually looked like in real life. Up before me every morning with breakfast ready and packed lunches prepared. Dressed like a 1950s pinup model every day, hair and makeup done. House spotless at all times with no cleaning service. You'll be doing it all yourself. Elaborate packed lunches for my work every single day. Dinner should be ready when I walk through the door, and I mean a full meal, not DoorDash or takeout. I continued. Bath drawn for me when I get home, foot rubs after long days, the full domestic goddess routine that you've been watching online. And yes, that includes the bedroom availability and enthusiasm that comes with traditional marriages, not the once-a-month duty sex we've been having. Her face went completely white, like someone had just told her that being a traditional wife involved actual work and sacrifice instead of just posting aesthetic photos online. "That's not what I meant," she stammered. "That's literally what every influencer you worship actually does," I replied. "I thought you wanted authenticity and traditional values. This is what those values actually look like when you live them, instead of just posting about them." This was when the mask came completely off, and I saw who Victoria had really become. She exploded with a fury I had never seen before in our entire 16-year marriage, calling me abusive, sexist, and controlling. Every buzzword from her online echo chambers came pouring out like she was having a meltdown in feminist bingo. "You're trying to turn me into a slave!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "I'm describing the lifestyle you've been showing me videos of for months," I said calmly. "If that's slavery, what does that say about your role models and the content you've been consuming?" Diana, who had been sitting quietly during this exchange like some kind of divorce court vulture waiting for roadkill, finally jumped into the conversation to defend her sister. "You're threatened by strong women who know their worth," she declared, with the confidence of someone who had never contributed anything meaningful to society. I actually laughed out loud at this point. "What worth?" I asked. "You bring salon receipts, DoorDash orders, and unpaid credit card bills to relationships. That's not value, that's overhead. You're a financial liability with legs." That's when Victoria said the words that officially ended our marriage in my mind. I deserve to be cherished and provided for because I'm a woman. That's how real relationships work. Because she's a woman. Not because of anything she had contributed, created, earned, or built. Not because of her character, her partnership, her love, or her support. Simply because she existed as a female human being, she believed she deserved to be financially supported in luxury. "You want to know what real relationships look like?" I asked. "Partners who contribute equally to the household. People who respect each other's work and sacrifices. Couples who don't demand lifestyles they can't afford or haven't earned. What you want isn't a husband, It's a financial sponsor with sexual benefits. The screaming match that followed probably violated noise ordinances in 3 counties. Victoria accused me of never appreciating her emotional labor and invisible contributions to our marriage. When I asked for specific examples of these contributions, she couldn't provide any that didn't involve spending my money or consuming online content about how special and valuable she was supposed to be. Diana kept jumping into our argument with phrases like toxic masculinity and financial abuse, apparently completely unaware that refusing to fund someone's Instagram fantasy lifestyle isn't abuse. It's basic sanity and self-preservation. Finally, I'd had enough of this insanity. Here's your choice, I said, looking directly at Victoria. We can work through this delusion together with counseling and compromise, or we can get divorced. I'm completely done enabling this madness and pretending it's normal behavior. She chose divorce without a moment's hesitation. Not counseling, not compromise, not working on our marriage, divorce. Because in her mind, any man who wouldn't fund her lifestyle demands without question wasn't worthy of her high-value presence. She packed a bag and left for Diana's place that same night, taking the BMW with her. But I was ready for this fight and had been preparing for months. The divorce process was eye-opening in ways I never expected it to be. It turns out that when you've been financially responsible throughout your entire marriage and your spouse has been running up debt for lifestyle maintenance while deliberately sabotaging her career, the courts definitely noticed these patterns. My lawyer was an absolute shark who loved cases like mine. "You've got everything documented?" she asked during our first consultation meeting. I handed over my carefully organized evidence folder. Recordings of Victoria planning to get fired from her job. Screenshots of her social media posts about deserving to be provided for. Bank statements showing her escalating spending patterns. Documentation of her work sabotage and attendance issues. Her detailed traditional wife plans that involved 0 traditional responsibilities. "This is absolutely beautiful," my lawyer said, flipping through the evidence with obvious satisfaction. She basically built her own case against alimony. I've never seen someone document their own entitlement this thoroughly. The financial forensics were even more damaging than I had expected them to be. My lawyer brought in a forensic accountant who traced every single dollar of Victoria's spending over the past 3 years. The numbers were absolutely staggering when laid out in black and white. She had spent more on clothes and beauty treatments than most people make in an entire year. All of this while contributing less and less to our actual household expenses and necessities. My business records showed steady income growth, responsible reinvestment in equipment and tools, and careful financial planning for the future. Victoria's financial records showed shopping sprees funded by credit cards that I was expected to pay off, with no consideration for our budget or financial goals. The judge wasn't impressed with her legal team's arguments at all. They tried claiming that she had sacrificed her career for our marriage and deserved compensation for that sacrifice. But my lawyer had recordings of her bragging about manipulating her way toward getting fired with severance pay. It's pretty hard to claim career sacrifice when you have audio recordings of someone saying, "I'm tired of working, I deserve to be taken care of." Victoria's lawyer argued that she had given up her career advancement for the sake of our marriage. My lawyer pulled out recordings of her bragging to the Trinity about skipping important meetings and plotting her severance package like it was some kind of retirement plan she had earned. She didn't sacrifice anything, my lawyer told the judge. She staged her own exit strategy to maintain her shopping habits while forcing her husband to become her sole financial support. We had to sell the house, which had barely appreciated in value during the 2 years we had owned it. After closing costs, realtor fees, and the fact that we had paid almost nothing toward the principal balance, there was virtually no equity to split between us. Victoria was absolutely devastated when she realized this. She had expected to walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars from the house sale. The BMW lease was in my name, so legally I got to keep it and decide what to do with it. Watching her realize that she had lost her trophy car was almost better than winning the lottery. "You can't take my car!" she screamed during the settlement negotiations. "It's not your car," my lawyer explained patiently, like she was talking to a child. "It's in his name. He makes the payments, and legally it's his property." The meltdown that followed was absolutely epic. Diana tried arguing that Victoria needed the car for work, apparently forgetting that Victoria had just spent 3 months trying to get fired and was now unemployed by choice. My business was completely protected because I'd been smart about separating personal and professional finances from the very beginning. The judge recognized that my company was built through my own labor, expertise, and years of hard work, not through marital assets or contributions from Victoria. In the end, Victoria walked away with half the proceeds from selling the house, which amounted to about $15,000 after all expenses were paid. She also got half of our savings account, which was another $10,000 after I had strategically moved most of the money to business accounts beforehand. She got some furniture and personal belongings, but that was essentially it. No alimony, no ongoing financial support, no claim to my business or future earnings. The judge saw right through her strategy and refused to reward her deliberate unemployment and financial manipulation. The difference in my life after the divorce was absolutely staggering. Without having to fund Victoria's endless lifestyle demands, I suddenly had disposable income again. I could go out with friends, eat decent food, and even started saving money for the first time in years. For the first time since we'd bought that expensive house, I started hitting the gym regularly again. I lost 30 pounds and gained muscle mass. I actually looked better at 42 than I had at 32, and I felt mentally clearer than I had in years. Work became enjoyable again without the crushing pressure of those mortgage payments and Victoria's constant spending demands. I could be selective about which projects I took on instead of desperately accepting every job that came my way. I started focusing on higher-end renovations and building relationships with better clients who appreciated quality work. It's amazing what happens when you're not desperate for every paycheck just to keep up with lifestyle inflation that you never wanted in the first place. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I started dating again. The contrast between my new relationship and my marriage was absolutely incredible. I met Jessica, a 37-year-old teacher who makes her own money and manages her own finances responsibly. She splits dinner bills without being asked, drives a paid-off Toyota that she maintains herself, shops at Target, and looks better in a $25 dress than Victoria ever did in designer clothing that cost hundreds of dollars. Most importantly, Jessica appreciates effort and hard work instead of simply expecting it as her due. She grew up on a ranch, so she understands the value of physical labor and appreciates what it takes to build something with your hands. She understands the value of money because she's earned every penny herself through her own work and education. When I told her about my business, she asked intelligent questions about growth strategies and market opportunities. She was genuinely interested in the work itself and the challenges of running a small business. Nothing about what my success could buy for her or how it could upgrade her lifestyle. The fireworks began when word got back to Victoria through mutual friends that I was dating someone new. She completely lost her mind and started a harassment campaign that lasted for weeks. The texts started immediately and came at all hours. "How dare you move on so quickly?" she wrote. "I can't believe you're dating someone already. She's obviously just using you for your money." The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The woman who had literally tried to use me as a financial sponsor was accusing someone else of being a gold digger. Then came the voicemails, and they were absolutely unhinged. "I've learned so much about myself during this separation," she said in one rambling message. "I realize now what we had was really special, and I think we made a mistake." Translation: I can't find another man stupid enough to fund my lifestyle demands, so maybe I should try to get my old meal ticket back. When I didn't respond to any of her messages, she escalated the harassment significantly. She started showing up at my work sites demanding to talk, which was embarrassing and unprofessional. She began calling Jessica's school trying to cause problems for her at work. She created fake social media accounts to stalk both of us online and leave nasty comments. The Trinity was equally unhinged in their response to my new relationship. Diana started posting passive-aggressive Facebook statuses about men who abandon their wives for younger women, apparently unaware that getting divorced isn't abandonment. It's liberation from a toxic situation. Chloe made snide comments about karma and how men always get what they deserve in the end, while her own husband was reportedly starting to question their household expenses and her constant shopping habits. Maya's engagement had been called off when her fiancé finally realized that she brought debt and demands to the relationship instead of partnership and contribution. The final straw in Victoria's harassment campaign came when she showed up unannounced at a restaurant where Jessica and I were having a quiet dinner together. She marched over to our table like she was about to deliver some kind of important proclamation, clearly having planned this confrontation in advance. "So, this is her," she said, looking Jessica up and down like she was inspecting livestock at a county fair. "I hope you know what kind of man you're dealing with here." Jessica, bless her heart, didn't miss a beat or show any intimidation. "You mean the kind who works hard, pays his bills, and doesn't expect other people to fund his lifestyle?" "Yeah, I figured that out pretty quickly when we started dating. Victoria's face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a thunderstorm. He'll never be able to give you what you deserve, she said, like she was delivering some kind of profound wisdom. Good thing I can give myself what I deserve, Jessica replied calmly. I've never needed a man to provide my happiness or financial security. I had never been more attracted to anyone in my entire life than I was to Jessica in that moment. Victoria stormed out of the restaurant, but not before knocking over a water glass and calling us both pathetic losers. The entire restaurant was staring at our table, and I was mortified by the scene she had created. Later that week, she sent me one final message offering to work on herself and become the wife I always wanted. She started listing all the things she would do differently, like she was negotiating a business contract for my affection and trying to win back a client. But here's the thing that she never understood. The wife I had always wanted was the one I originally married 16 years earlier. That woman had disappeared completely into a social media rabbit hole and got replaced by an entitled consumer who saw me as nothing more than a wallet with benefits. I replied with one simple message. If you contact me again, I'm filing for a restraining order. I've moved on with my life, and maybe you should do the same. Then I blocked her number and all her social media accounts for good. I never heard from her again after that final exchange. Since then, I think she finally realized that you can't unfuck what's been completely fucked up. The last I heard through mutual acquaintances, she was still living at Diana's place and working part-time at a retail job. She was driving a used Honda again. The irony was absolutely perfect. She was still posting on social media about knowing her worth while living in her sister's spare room and working minimum wage. This whole experience taught me something incredibly important about relationships and human nature. Respect is absolutely everything in a marriage, and once it's completely gone, everything else is just empty performance and going through the motions. Victoria had stopped respecting my work, my sacrifices, my opinions, and eventually me as a person. She got completely brainwashed by social media content into thinking she deserved a lifestyle she wasn't willing to work for, funded by a man she had stopped appreciating years earlier. Some women nowadays are being programmed by social media to believe they're prizes just for existing, while men are expected to prove their worth through endless financial provision and material gifts. It's a completely toxic dynamic that destroys partnerships and turns relationships into transactional arrangements. But there are still women out there who understand what real partnership looks like. Women who appreciate effort instead of just expecting it, who bring genuine value to relationships instead of just demanding it from their partners. Jessica proves this to me every single day with her actions and attitude. The key to avoiding this kind of disaster is recognizing the red flags early in the process and having the courage to walk away when someone shows you who they really are through their actions and demands. When I look back at everything that happened, I'm actually grateful that Victoria showed her true colors before I wasted even more years of my life trying to satisfy someone who could never be satisfied. I dodged a massive financial and emotional bullet, and now I'm in the best relationship of my life with someone who actually appreciates what I bring to the table. If your partner starts following traditional wife influencers and talking about how they deserve to be provided for without contributing equally, don't walk away. Run. Don't try to fix them or convince them otherwise. Save yourself the heartache, the money, and the years of your life that you'll never get back. There are better people out there who will actually appreciate what you do and want to build something together instead of just consuming what you've already built. Trust me on this one. I learned it the hard way, but I learned it well.